Welcome back everyone. This is the 7th video in a video series. So if you haven't watched the other ones, I highly suggest you do so you can keep up with this one. Now let's get started. In this video we will cover tuples and we will go into a deeper dive of lists and for loops. And finally we will see functions to keep your code clean. So let's get started with tuples. I actually have mentioned this in a previous videos. Tuples are very similar to lists. Now, the only difference between tuples and lists is that in tuples, you can't actually modify the information. You can only access it. So let's go ahead and create a user information variable. And tuples are defined by opening and closing parentheses. Now let's go ahead and put John. Then let's go ahead and put a last name like Smith. Then let's give him an age. Let's give him 25 years old. And at the end, let's add an email. johnsmith@gmail.com. Now I'm just going to add a boolean at the end so you can see that we can put any kind of information inside of a tuple, very similar to lists. Now if we print out the user information, you'll see that when we run it, it will print out very similar to a list. The only difference is that it will present it with parentheses instead of brackets. And very similar to lists, we can access information inside of it. So let's go ahead and do 0, and you'll see that we get John. Now let's put a colon, and let's run this. Now, as you can see here, when we put a colon and we don't put anything at the end of it, it means to do everything. However, we could actually go ahead and count the indents and go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and put 4 in here. And you'll see that, oh, well, actually, it's not inclusive. It's exactly the same as list, so we have to go 0 to 5. And it will run all of the user information again. Now, what do I mean by you can't change information? Well, in lists, let me actually go ahead and do user information 2. This will be a list. And let's copy all of this information. In lists, you can go ahead and do user information 2.append 15. And when we print this, you'll see that we don't get a mistake. It just adds 15 to the end. And you can actually go ahead and do user information 2 and add as an index and change it to something else. So if we want his name to be changed to Alex, you'll see that when we run this, the list changes to Alex. However, when we want to do this with tuples, we actually can't do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it so you can see user information.append, and you'll see that to start off, it won't even give you the option like it normally does with the lists. You can't tab to make it happen. And if we try something like Alex, you'll see that when we print user information, not only will it not add it, we'll actually get a mistake because it says tuple has no object append. Now, if we want to do something like access the information and then change it like we did previously with the list, you'll see that it says tuple does not support item assignment. So you might be wondering, why would I use a tuple instead of a list? Well, since Python doesn't have to be constantly checking if the information is being changed or if you're adding or removing something, then it is actually much faster. So if you are using large pieces of code and you have a database or something that you only want to access and you know that you will not have to change it in the future, then you can use tuples for this because it's much faster. Now let's go ahead and go deeper into lists. There's actually something really useful with lists, and it's that you can create a list of lists. Now, what I mean by this is you can click enter, and as you can see here, it will automatically add a line between this. And you can put user information of someone like John Smith, 23 years old. Well, actually, he was 25 years old. And then we can do john@smith.@gmail.com. And finally, let's add true. And then you can add another list separated by a comma, where you can put another person's information. So let's go ahead and do Alex. Let's put Smith again. Let's imagine they are brothers. So 22. And let's add an email, alexs@gmail.com. And let's put false. Now if we go ahead and print user information, you'll see that we get both lists in the same column, which is actually kind of ugly, but it doesn't really matter as long as you can access both pieces of information. Now, if we try to access this information, you'll see that if we type in a 0, we'll get all of John Smith's information. And if we add a 1, you'll see that we get all of Alex's Smith information. Something really useful that you can do with this is after the first bracket, go ahead and add another one and put 0. Now, what do you think this will do? What piece of information do you think it will access? I'll give you 5 seconds, try to figure it out on your own, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. So when we run this, you'll see that it guessed the first list, and then it will get the index 0 of that first list. So it will print out Alex. As you can see here, it prints out Alex. Now, you can actually go ahead and append information similar to what we have done before. And you can go ahead and user information.append, and inside of it, create another list with another person's information. So let's go ahead and add my information. So Jacob, then let's go ahead and put a random last name, Smith, and then let's put 18 and a false email, gmail.com, and let's put false. Now if we go ahead and print this user information, you'll see that it adds it just fine at the end, Jacob Smith, and it is still a list inside of a list. However, if you go ahead and remove the list that you put inside, you'll see that everything is in this, like, telling you that it is wrong. This is because you can't append various values at once. So just remember, if you want to add a list inside of a list, you have to use the brackets. And this is called a multi-dimensional list. This is because this is the first list is the first dimension, and the second list would be the second dimension. You can actually imagine this as rows and columns. This is a row. These are all rows, and columns would be the names, the last names, the age, and so on. Now you can actually go ahead and add a list inside of a list inside of a list. The use cases for that are very rare. I just want you to know that it exists. So if you ever need to create a list inside of a list inside of a list, it is a possibility. So let's just create random numbers inside of here. 1, 2, 3. Well, actually, we need to create another list inside of the list. So let's go ahead and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And inside of the second list, let's go ahead and add another list with separated by a comma once again. And this list will, actually this looks kind of ugly. Let me go ahead and put it like this. Another space right here, then tap this. And put a continuation of the list. So 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then let's go ahead and create another list inside of the list inside of the list, which is actually really confusing by this point. So 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And then we need another comma. Then 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. The way we would add this information inside of this string is exactly the same as the other one. So let's go ahead and put 0. And when we print it, you'll see that we get this whole list inside of a list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, if we want to go ahead and access a string, a list inside of the list, we can go ahead and put another one bracket outside of the other bracket. And as you can see here, we get this list. And finally, to access an item inside of the list, inside of the other list, we can go ahead and add another. And that's so as you can see here, when we run it, we'll get 8. Now, this is really not as useful, but once again, I just want you to know that it exists. Now, let's go ahead and Control Z until we get the user information we had originally, because I'll need that data. And let's go ahead and create a for loop. So for I in user information, print I. Now, what do you think this will print out? Actually, let me go ahead and put brackets because it's warning me that it will create a mistake. Now, what do you think this will print out? Pause the video for 5 seconds and try to figure it out on your own. Okay, so welcome back. If we click run, you'll see that it prints out the first item. So John Smith 25. Then the second list, and finally the third list. This is pretty in line with what we have seen up to this point, but if we want to go ahead and do for P in I, what do you think it will print out when we go ahead and put P right here? I'll give you 5 seconds, pause the video, and I'll explain the logic behind it. Welcome back once again. So what this is saying is for I in user information. So I will take every list inside of the major list. So as you can see here, it took this list, then this list, and this list, one at a time. Now by saying for P in I, it means that for every value inside of the list that we printed out here, so John Smith 25, then the email, then true, it will print out every single one of those values. So as you can see here, it will print out one value at a time, one by one. Now this is a little bit more useful because you might need to have multi-dimensional lists, because whenever you want to store information from more than one user, then this is a great way to do it instead of creating a variable for every single user. Now let's go ahead and go into functions. Functions are a little bit more complicated. Functions are a way to write code that you can use again in the future. So let's go ahead and show you how you define something. Hello world. Well, actually, you can't use exclamation point. So let's go ahead and put hello world. Now this is the syntax. First you put define, because you are defining a function. Then you go ahead and do hello, well, whatever you want to name it. And finally, you open and close the brackets. And similar to if statements, for loops, while loops, everything, you have to go ahead and put 2 periods to tell it that it's starting. Now, you can go ahead and do something like print, hello, this is a helper function. And when you run this code, you'll notice that it doesn't do anything. Now this is because you haven't called the function yet. So let's go ahead and do hello world once. And when we run it, you'll see that it prints out hello. this is a helper function. Now if we run it again, you can see that it runs hello. This is a helper function 2 times. You can put any amount of code inside of here, and it will help you out. It will help you make your code cleaner. This is because you can put as many lines of code you want inside of the function, and you can run the function as many times as you want inside one single line. Now, you can actually go ahead and do print, but usually you use return, and then this is a helper function. Now if we run this, you'll see that once again it will do nothing, and if we do hello world, you'll see that it still doesn't do anything. This is because this isn't actually printing whatever we get back. This is just telling it every time we run hello world, return. This is a helper function. Now there are various use cases for this. You can go ahead and print hello world, and you'll see that when we run it, it says this is a helper function. However, we can also store the information inside of a variable. So helper function, let's call it, and let's run hello world. And when we run it, you'll see that we get nothing once again. But if we print out helper function, then you'll get this is a helper function. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, remember to leave a like and subscribe. And stay tuned for the next video where we will be going deeper into functions.